Hello everyone, it's Akiziel here. Sorry to take so long again, but extenuating circumstance and all, Oh, a storm knocked out power across two-thirds of the country, followed by working 50-hour work weeks. So I've been kind of out of it for the last 3 months, thereabout. But I'm back now, and we'll be continuing in my reaction to Burger Krieg's video. Let me tell you about Vampire's spooky cousin, Wraith the Oblivion lore. And let's see what other legions that Burger has to tell us about tonight.
The Legion of Paupers is special in many ways. Some say that it is the largest legion of them all, which is obviously dross and said in like a satirical, political hyperbole type context. Although it does make a certain amount of sense, their practical purpose in Stygian society is to act as sleuths and detectives, getting to the bottom of all manner of unexplained mysteries and phenomena, which there's a lot of in the underworld. And these are never the
Well, yes, given all the nonsensical stuff that happens in the regular layer of the underworld before you even potentially get into the strange way that the well, I'd barely hazard calling them rules of the labyrinth turn everything topsy-turvy.
big questions, like what even is Oblivion actually? Like seriously, what the fuck is it? They're more like homicide detectives. This also of course predestines them to being spies and information brokers, among other reasons, because the real actual main purpose of the existence of the Paupers is to be a place where all of the wraiths nobody else wants can go. As I said before, there's often a lot of ambiguity as to where any particular wraiths actually belong, and the legions often squabble very desperately over them. Sometimes one is willing to trade them away to the other. Other times they simply can find no compromise. Or sometimes, like, nobody wants them, nobody tries to claim them, even in cases where very clearly they would belong in a particular legion. Whenever any of these scenarios happen, the
I'm kind of curious what would cause them not to want someone in their legion.
Wraith is given to the Legion of Paupers. But it isn't just the miscellaneous garbage category that ends up here, at least not on paper. Any wraiths whose deaths are shrouded in mystery, which actually happens a lot more often than you might think, they end up here also. Though death tends to leave very clear marks on wraiths, and most wraiths actually kind of remember what happened, there are situations where that just isn't the case. And discovering the manner in which they died, given that it's a pretty important point in their life, actually becomes a major quest of these wraiths, which is why they're perfect for the paupers. They are perhaps even less hierarchical than the Iron Legion. In even like a structural sense, they do not have a very clear hierarchy. You are expected to sort of follow the orders of the people who are kind of considered your superiors, and you're supposed to
I kind of wonder, or as a little thought, if say a pirate, or died, and the cause of death involved a situation where, as they were walking with a barrel of gunpowder down the docks, they were shot in the back by a treacherous mutineer, and just so happened to at the same time be struck by lightning, which ignited the gunpowder. One might wonder which legion they'd be classified in, given that on one hand, them dying from a lightning bolt igniting a barrel of gunpowder in their hands would most definitely be an accident, but on the other hand, and had the explosion not killed them, being shot in the back probably very well could have. Because, musket balls back then were fairly large, if I remember correctly.
to investigate the things that you're supposed to investigate. But outside of that, you get to be whoever you want to be. Even if someone is of a clearly higher rank than you, there's no, like, honorifics and titles and whatever the fuck. It's just a sort of dismal camaraderie among the paupers. And first among them is the beggar lord, who, ironically, doesn't even actually beg that much. He just takes whatever he's given. In a sense, it is actually he who gets begged, because on the Council of Death Lords, he tends to be the swing vote, which as a habitually underestimated political operator is a position he is well suited for. He doesn't even need to fight for the continued existence of his legion, he just gets the scrap from the other ones all the time. He doesn't even like his job all that much, he doesn't want to have the position that he has. And the only reason he's even in there in the first place is because he was a personal mate of Charon, probably even during his lifetime, which would make him Mycenaean. Some claim he was an actual beggar in real life, which is why he has that name. He is tired of existence in general, and the only reason he has not ended it by now by flinging himself into Oblivion is because he is a self-described coward. Although how much of that is like an act? Who knows? His palace is the seat of Golden Tears, a construct.
So a friend end of the Reaper, or I guess more accurately, the ferryman, who so he hates his job, doesn't want to do it, and but continues just because continuing on is easier than ending it all, despite how much he wants to do so.
Club it together without like particular style or design ideas in mind. No, like this is where you go through the corridor. It's all just whatever pieces there are, put them in there. Who gives a shit? It's kind of a reflection of Stygia itself in a way, and you kind of
and also kind of a reflection of the Legion, given that, you know, there's, well, the hodgepodge of people that aren't desired by the other legions for one reason or the other.
Sometimes not really sure where the palace ends and the rest of the city begins. The only thing everyone agrees upon when it comes to the seat of Golden Tears is that it fucking sucks. Both aesthetically and as a home for wraiths. Nobody really knows their way around, the internal infrastructure is just not fit for purpose, and quite frankly, the place is fucking ugly, fam. People disappear in this palace all the time, and everybody kinda knows that they eventually come back as like filing cabinets and fountain pens. Wraith!
Ew. People mysteriously disappearing and end up being forged into items. I wonder what exactly causes that.
Of the paupers get sent to the soul forges all the time. It's what fills the beggar lord's coffers. He stopped caring about his people a long time ago. If you value your freedom, the Legion of Paupers is a good place for you, but at the same time, it also comes with all of the costs that freedom has. And finally, we have...
In this case, it's the chance that you'll be snatched up and soul off to put into a soul forge, or just line the Lord's pockets.
Have the most special legion of them all, the Legion of Fate. This legion does not operate the way any of the others do. Their purpose is much more of an executive one, guarding the existence of the Stygian hierarchy itself. They're a tiny elite group of wraiths who only really spring into action when the existence of the Empire itself is at stake. No particular...
So kind of like a security bureau. Yeah, security bureau. There we go.
Kind of death marks one as a member of the Legion of Fate. It just happens that some people who die, their death marks are particularly bright, luminous, fulminant even, and many of them also have like symbols of infinity and determinism like dice all over their bodies. These dead belong to the Fates, and nobody contests this, even though a lot of people don't like it. The only thing some of these wraiths have in common is that they shaped human history by being at the right place at the right time. Small things that they did had a huge impact on the world. This is by no means true of all of them. Many actually led rather unremarkable lives, although, you know, who knows what kind of ripples of causality these unremarkable lives had through the butterfly effect. The Fates do. They know. They know this. They have this information. Yes, it's Fates plural, and they're not the Fates, which is confusing, so let me explain. In the underworld, there is an entity called the Lady of Fate, which is sort of a goddess, if you want, and nobody actually knows what exactly she is. A few say that she's actually just a wraith, which many consider to be rather blasphemous. Others say she is Eve, the mother of Cain, and even others say that she is an immensely powerful Euthanatos mage who has just sort of broken the concept of entropy itself. But most people think she's something else entirely, which, you know, quite frankly, probably, yeah. She helped Charon on many of his heroic exploits, and it is by her grace that he is the Emperor of Stygia. She is related to, but definitely not one of, the Ladies of Fate, which are... to be honest, I couldn't tell you that either. They are an undefined number of mentally linked up entities that are perfect copies of each other, and presumably also the Lady of Fate. Nobody's seen her in quite some time either. Nobody knows exactly how many of them there are.
I wonder if her disappearing and Charon disappearing is in any way linked. Also, this whole thing about the Fates is kind of making me think about those witches from Greek lore, or who shared an eye and passed it around amongst themselves.
But they all together jointly hold the title of Death Lord of the Legion of Fate. Even members of the Legion of Fate only see the Ladies of Fate very, very rarely, and this is considering they all live on the same compound, on like an island in the middle of fucking nowhere. Yeah, the Seat of Fate is not just not located within Stygia, it's also like actually pretty fucking far away. Weird fact though, trees grow here. That's a thing. Nowhere else in the underworld does that happen, at least as far as Western wraiths are concerned.
Wait, trees grow as in like actually growing, not being shaped from ectoplasm in a soul forge, but actually growing. Huh.
And it's an immensely valuable resource. There is a lot more to say about the Legion of Fate, but quite frankly, that is a level of Wraith deep lore that it's really counterproductive to get into here today. You're not gonna play a Legion of Fate member as a player character, most likely, and if you do, your GM will know a lot about the lore of Wraith already. And they pretty much never interact with the skin lands at all, unless it's for very specific regions. In which case, the GM will probably, of whatever chronicle, also know a lot about Wraith lore. Let's instead talk about the guilds. And what I really mean when I say the guilds is the Arcanoi. It's just that the two concepts are inextricably linked. Arcanoi are the disciplines of Wraith the Oblivion. They are supernatural powers that ghosts possess because they are ghosts. There are 16 Arcanoi in total, and though Wraiths may have certain predispositions, for some of them, a talent to be adept at one of them, or several in particular, there's no such thing as in-clan or out-of-clan Arcanoi. Any Wraith can learn any Arcanos. Not to mention, many don't learn any of them because they find other ways of being useful in Stygian society. All legions have practitioners of all the Arcanoi within their ranks, but of course because the legions are structured differently, they have different interests, different tasks, the numbers vary. Frequent use of any Arcanos will over time leave its mark on the corpus of the Wraith, and this mark cannot be removed. Some of them are more problematic than others. Each Arcanos has an associated guild, which any practitioner may or may not be a member of. But it's always kind of beneficial to be a member of that guild because it stores huge amounts of secrets and techniques and resources deep within its organizational vaults. These guilds are ancient, venerable institutions, some of which predate even the existence of the Stygian Empire itself and the rule of Charon. Having essential monopolies on particular crafts, they have an enormous amount of political influence. Except, of course, it's really not that simple because the guilds don't actually exist. And I don't mean this in the this is fiction type sense because Wraith is an imaginary role-playing game someone came up with. I mean this in the nudge nudge wink wink kind of way. Okay.
Oh, so they're not really an official thing kind of way, I'm assuming.
So here's what happened, right? Basically, in the late medieval period, the guilds managed to put aside all their fighting and squabbling that they were constantly engaged in their monopolist competition to form a sort of trade federation, a Hanseatic league of the underworld, if you will. And then they decided to use their complete control over every relevant aspect of the industrial economy to do a sort of coup. Yeah, this kind of thing kind of happens a lot in the underworld. They wanted a council of guilds to rule the Stygian hierarchy, with Charon or, whoever as a sort of figurehead emperor to lend them some sort of legitimacy. The legions in particular were supposed to serve them directly instead of that figurehead emperor. And then Charon and the Death Lords were like, nah, bro, fuck that. Y'all are dissolved. For real, no cap. Yeah, look, people just talk differently back then. It was the medieval times.
Yes, quite. People talking that way during medieval times. Most certainly, indubitably. Although, yeah, it looks like my guess was right. They exist in a unofficial capacity given their dissolution.
There was a little bit of turmoil, you might say, but in the end it worked. The guilds were officially destroyed and no longer existed as legal entities with any sort of political standing. What remained was vast networks of practitioners of these individual arcanoi who shared pre-established networks of contacts and supply lines. They had certain pre-existing business arrangements to honor and also control of certain repositories of knowledge. So essentially, the guilds just continued operating, but they only existed unofficially. And of course, their monopolies were immediately weakened and nowadays are really not firm at all. But the Dark Kingdom of Iron cannot exist without practitioners of these arcanoi. And the practitioners of these arcanoi just work better when they work together. The names of these guilds are inextricably linked with the respective arcanoi that they represent, and even today, any practitioner of a given arcanos is referred to by others by the name of the guild that used to have the monopoly over that arcanos. Doesn't matter whether they're actually a guild member, because again, the guilds are not a thing. And the very
well, that certainly speaks to how influential the guilds are, or that even after their dissolution, and their use as a naming convention, especially if the dissolution was some time ago.
Definitions of what is and what isn't an arcanos are fuzzy in and of themselves. Many have sub-disciplines that some argue should be arcanoi in their own right, and some of those are, whereas others have overlaps where some people argue that they should be the same arcanos actually. They're social constructs is what I'm trying to say. There are even evil arcanoi outside of the 16 that we're going to talk about today, and they are practiced by specters instead of wraiths, although wraiths can also learn those. Today, the guilds, and thus everyone who practices these given individual arcanoi, exist in a sort of tiered legal system. All guilds are officially banned, but some of them are more banned than others. The less banned ones are necessary for Stygia to function, and the more banned ones tend to be blatant violations of the dictum mortem. AKA, the more banned ones are the ones more likely to interact with the world of the living. So yeah, if you had a vampire game and you interacted with a wraith that used, like, ghostly powers, there was an inherently rogue element to them. Most wraiths fear the hierarchy too much to even acquire these abilities. We start with what are known as the High Guild.
So then, and I assume that well, that any Wraith who's known to have those abilities is likely going to have a close eye kept on them.
Which are essential for the continuing operation of the infrastructure of the Stygian hierarchy, and which are respected enough to pretty much operate out in the open and be valued and directly worked with by the legions. Inhabit is the Arcanos that allows a Wraith to, well, inhabit an otherwise inanimate object. If that inanimate object is built for a purpose, they may even be able to use it to do the things that it is designed to do. Or, not designed to do if you're very powerful. The primary targets of Inhabit are machines of all sorts, from cars to printing presses. But many of the most useful applications actually lie with computers and the navigation of cyberspace. Yes, Wraiths can get into your computer and hack you. A Wraith can
Taking the ghost in the machine, literally in this case.
do pretty much anything a mortal hacker can do, except they can also sort of like physically enter the internet and travel along the lines of the internet because it's all connected, just like they can do with power lines. Which, to be fair, is kind of fucking dangerous. Practitioners of
I can only imagine, given what the internet it has become and the kind of things that are on it, that there's going to be quite a few Wraiths who are traumatized by the things they see there. Also, Wraiths traveling through power lines and the like. I wonder if that might have been inspired by the whole thing, where they say that ghosts create electromagnetic disturbances, and that's why people who call themselves ghost hunters will walk around with EM readers.
Inhabit are known as artificers, and you might very rightly ask yourself why they're considered a high guild if the entire purpose of their power is to interact with the skin lands. Well, Inhabit is really an offshoot from the thing that the Guild of Artificers really does, the thing that gives them their economic power base, and which is perhaps the most important scratch that, it's definitely the most important craft in the underworld.
Let me guess. Are they the ones who were in charge of soul forging?
Soul forging, the process of transforming plasmic objects, including Wraiths, into different kinds of plasmic objects. The secrets of Inhabit were discovered by the ancient Wraith Nahudri, who you might think, given that he literally controls the most essential industry to the Stygian underworld, might be able to crown himself emperor. It's just that Nahudri has never really been a particularly ambitious man, and also, untold eons ago, Charon rescued him from certain Oblivion in the Labyrinth, so he's always been a very strong supporter of the Emperor's reign, if for no other reason, perhaps, than just gratitude. Frequent use of Inhabit eventually manifests as carrying symbols on your body that are also carried by the kinds of devices that you inhabit. Which, yes, does in fact mean that there are Wraiths with Apple logos on their bodies running around. Moliate is...
Well, not just Apple logos. I'm now imagining something. Some of them running around with barcodes on their bodies and stuff like that, as well. And of course, there's the Windows logo and whatnot.
The Arcanos that allows practitioners to alter the corpus of Wraiths, whether it be their own or other Wraiths, with or without their consent. You can think of it a little bit like Vicissitude, except Vicissitude is a caveman smashing rocks together to create a hand axe, and Moliate is Michelangelo with a laser printer. Because the corpus of Wraiths is so malleable...
There's something I find hilarious about the mental image of Michelangelo being gifted a laser printer, and the utter confusion he would have given, the time period that he lived in.
Merliate can easily make their skin be made out of steel, give them mighty wings that they can use to fly, reshape faces and bodies on a whim, and when they're powerful enough, just shapeshift into any shape imaginable. Physics are not an obstacle. Of course, one of the simplest applications of Merliate is to alter your own appearance, which can be done very, very quickly. So it's very popular with spies. Practitioners of Merliate are known as maskers for that exact reason. But of course, the guild at large basically sells its services as cosmetic surgery, and that's what a lot of people go to them for. And of course,
I imagine that the service might have been quite popular with the Legion of Paupers, considering that the whole investigation aspect, and that having disguises would be quite in demand with them.
Of course, while visiting the salon, small talk happens and one might inquire as to some of the rumors that one might want to learn more information about, or, just talk how one wishes that a certain other Wraith might be disgraced in some manner. And hey, some people, they just leave big tips. That's what they do. They're generous people, and you go the extra mile for them. Frequent use of Merliate will eventually lead to the discovery of a particular aspect of their own appearance that even the greatest masters of the Arcanos cannot change about themselves, no matter how hard they try. Which characteristic that is different for every Wraith. This does allow them to be identified by an extremely good detective, but a lot of maskers have some very clever solutions for this problem. Castigate is the Arcanos that allows practitioners to keep their own shadow and the shadow of other Wraiths in check. The methods utilized for this are numerous, ranging from talk therapy to physical ordeals. But in the end, they all serve the purpose of weakening someone's shadow and strengthening their psyche. The powers of Castigate also work very well against specters, who are, mostly shadow. So a lot of practitioners of the art also fight on the front lines against Oblivion. Remember that Wraith is a setting where ideas, memories, and emotions manifest physically. So the process of fighting with someone's shadow is physical. Practitioners of Castigate.
Oh. For a moment there I was imagining that it's going to be more of a case where they just give someone regular old therapy, in order to fight the ghost depression, and so they don't have an existential crisis.
Are known as pardoners because they pardon you from the sins of your shadow, and being essentially the psychotherapists of the underworld, they are in enormous demand. Every single Wraith has a shadow, and beating that shadow back is what makes the hierarchy function. It is a huge part of everyone's existence. So it should be obvious why having people with these kinds of shadow banishing powers would be useful. And though they have access to a lot of the secrets and darkest thoughts and actual weaknesses of a lot of the most powerful Wraiths that exist in the world, the guild is pretty harsh with anyone who lets shit slip. Which is
So they actually you have what do you call it again? Patient confidentiality
is of course made easier by the fact that pardoners are able to have greater control over their own shadow, so their corrupting influence isn't as strong. Frequent use of Castigate will eventually turn the practitioner's fingers black because they're constantly touching the darkness of Oblivion. Usury is the Arcanos that allows practitioners to manipulate the raw emotional energy of Pathos, giving it, taking it away, transferring it somewhere else, and even changing its state of matter. Of course, they can't inherently create or destroy Pathos, they have to use the same ways that everyone else does. Pathos is perhaps the most useful resource that any Wraith has access to because it allows them to heal their corpus and fuel the arcanoi that they have mastered. And through the powers of usury, it becomes a currency in the complicated economy of the underworld. Practitioners of
how fitting in that name.
usury are known as, usurers, and many of them have an uphill battle to fight when it comes to maintaining a stellar reputation. Even though theirs is a high guild because it is required for the economy of Stygia to function, many times it has been corrupted by people who used their powers in less than honorable ways. They would hold wraiths down and sort of suck out their pathos. They would just...
Oh, so the Ghost IRS.
not pay out what they owed, squeeze wraiths from like their systemic banking monopoly position. I mean, the bar is very high. You need to be able to trust your bankers and you need to be able to trust your healers. And usurers are both. And many of them also have the ability to create binding contracts between people or like alter their ghostly credit score. So they're no...
Oh lord, so it's... So the banks the banks and the hospitals have joined forces essentially, or well, more accurately, are the same people. And they've got their own debt collectors. Gee, yeah, I suppose next Xburger is going to mention that the Corpus Healing Service can be ridiculously expensive.
Too. The main body of the guild works hard to make sure that any bad actors are sent to the Soul Forges post-haste, but given that many of those bad actors are kind of fucking rich, wealthy, influential, they don't always have the political power to do so. Frequent use of usury will eventually make filigree mathematical markings appear on the body of the practitioner. In an arcane way that really no one could possibly understand other than the usurer themselves, these markings record all of the transactions that have been made by that usurer. We move on to the working guilds, whose arcanoi are not strictly speaking required for the Stygian society to function, but they...
So they become a walking ledger.
Don't break the dictum mortem, and they are often kinda useful, so they're tolerated. Keening is the arcanos that allows practitioners to instill fine-tuned emotional states in other wraiths through song, or sometimes it can also be speech. This is in any horror film when you hear the scary song that's like playing out of nowhere, that's keening. And though this may seem kinda useless, remember that pathos is pretty much the most valuable thing in the underworld, and it is generated by inducing emotions. So if you master keening, you have a shortcut to this. Not to mention all the other advantages of being able to play with people's emotions. Many practitioners can even do this in a very subtle way while they're just talking to people, so they don't even know that their heartstrings are being plucked at, and they think that they're giving the concessions that they are giving out of the kindness of their own hearts. It was their idea. Practitioners of
Yes, as masterful manipulation, and when you can make someone not only not realize is that you're the one pulling the strings, but also also make you think that you're having your way at the same time.
Keening are known as chanteurs. They are artistes, bards, skalds, if you will, and their services are highly sought after in all strata of society. Any good party, or even just a get-together, needs to have at least one chanteur on staff at least. And the hierarchy considers them very valuable because it allows wraiths to experience many of the things that they would otherwise go to the Skinlands for. And also, of course, because of the nature of what they do, they are kind of the economic engine that creates the currency to push back against Oblivion and its shadows. Frequent use of keening will eventually manifest in a sort of barely audible shroud of music around the chanteur. What exactly that music sounds like depends highly on the type of wraith and what they have been singing, but frustratingly, it is never really loud enough to be used as background music. Argos is the arcanos that allows practitioners to navigate the dangerous and unpredictable weather patterns of the Tempest in relative safety. Though it is certainly never comfortable, the Tempest in and of itself is not always deadly. In most places, it's actually rather tame. The problem is its unpredictability and how quickly things can change, which means that pretty much everyone who wanders off into the Tempest is pretty much doomed a lot sooner rather than later. Argos allows Wraiths to intuit the patterns of the Tempest and find safe passage through them. Practitioners of Argos are known as Harbingers, and they work mainly as messengers and guides, but also as explorers and logistics specialists. Many, especially the Harbingers themselves, argue that they should be considered a high guild because of how useful their abilities are, but because the byways exist, they're not strictly speaking required for the hierarchy to function. They're more of a convenience, albeit one that Stygian society has come to heavily rely on. No matter if they're in a major necropolis or some small outposts, a Harbinger is always going to be able to find work. Some of the more powerful ones can even offer the comfort of vehicular transport through the Tempest. So yes, definitely boats and submarines, but also cars. They can go over the sea because this is the underworld. Frequent use of Argos eventually manifests as...
Now I'm just imagining one of those transforming cars from the spy movies. That turns into a submarine.
There's a sort of black sheen over the eyes of the practitioner, which grows darker with time. Harbingers with pitch black eyes essentially carry the marks of their experience right on their face. Fatalism is the arcanos that allows practitioners to perceive the vast and infinitely intricate web of causality detached from time. Advanced practitioners can even manipulate the way that this web is spun, sort of reposition strands on it or otherwise interfere maliciously or beneficially with the fate of any given individual wraith. This ability is very much not spontaneous, but requires quite a bit of ritualism and woo-woo to actually engage in. The farther away in time the target of the reading, or the more accurate the reading needs to be, the more woo-woo is required. And even then, it is far from a perfect art form. The web of fate changes all of the time, whether that be through natural phenomena or the subtle manipulations of those who know how to do it, having huge ripple effects down the line. Practitioners of fatalism are known as oracles, and though there are rather few of them, and they are generally distrusted by Stygian society, their spiritual connection to the Lady of Fate, not to mention the Legion of Fate, whom they help identify candidates that are appropriately death-marked for them, ensures that they are seen as a necessary piece of social discomfort. Their services are useful to those that can afford them, and obviously, nobody really wants to piss off someone with the power to manipulate fate. Frequent use of fatalism event.
Well, yeah, it's kind of like how you don't mess with the kind of people who can put lifelong curses on you either.
Eventually manifests in certain markings and symbols appearing on the body, similar to what happens with usurers. Except here they manifest as representations of whatever form of ritualism the oracle in question uses to focus their powers. This is often like laying cards, gazing into crystal balls, reading like tea leaves, but it could also be like differential risk analysis and psychohistory. It really depends on the wraith in question.
Differential risk analysis is so they'll have to drop a I think it was called a risk matrix then, and table with all these little columns and slots. That's in all that stuff. I won't go too into it.
It's really just a way to get your mind to do what you are trying to make it do. Phantasm is the arcanos that allows practitioners to manipulate the dreams of both the living and the dead. Wraiths do not sleep as such, but they do slumber in their fetters, especially when they're trying to recuperate. Not to mention, Phantasm allows for the creation of real and actually rather complex illusions in the underworld. The core of their power really lies in the manipulation of dreams, though, which is a bit of a problem for the hierarchy, of course, because the dreams of the living are almost as easily influenced as the dreams of the dead. It is even...
Well, yes, and also there've been quite a few cases of people doing things because they had some rather bizarre dream the night before. Or in other cases, their dreams are prophetic, which I can imagine that if, say, the people who can muck around with fate were to work with the people who can shape dreams, it'd be quite the combination. And as it comes to messing with the Skinlands,
even within the power of Phantasm to drag dreamers down to the underworld to have them experience the world of the dead. Though of course when they wake up it was all just a particularly vivid nightmare. But the dictum mortem does not, unlike the masquerade, exist simply for the purpose of keeping the existence of ghosts hidden from the mortal world. Wraiths are not trying to hide among mortals that they prey on. It exists because the hierarchy considers it unethical to interact with the mortal world. And by tormenting them with constant harrowing nightmares, or making them unable to sleep, or unable to wake up, Phantasm users can actually do a whole lot of damage to mortals. Practitioners of Phantasm are known as Sandmen, whether they be men or women or something else entirely. They tend to work in nomadic traveling actor troupes where they put on elaborate plays for people to enjoy. But they also often act as healers, both physical and spiritual, which for Wraiths of course is kind of the same thing, by improving people's slumber. Frequent use of Phantasm eventually manifests as images projected on...
So the traveling dream weaving performing troupe that helps the dead to fight their ghost depression and so they don't turn into monsters. I kind of wonder how they came up with this idea. Yeah, over at I believe it was White Wolf.
Onto the skin of that Wraith, kind of like if it was a 3D movie screen. Depending on the thoughts and dreams of that Wraith, these can be rather disconcerting, though they're never clear enough to allow other people to sort of read their mind just by looking at them. If anything, the main problem with it is that it leads to a lot of misunderstandings. Now we come to the criminal guilds, the ones whose arts specifically violate the dictum mortem and who really do very little else. Pandemonium is the arcanos that allows practitioners to harness the powers of chaos to create surreal effects in the Skinlands.
Oh, let me guess. These are the ones who are responsible for all the paranormal activities that inspire people to believe in ghosts.
The power of coincidence can be bent to an utterly unreasonable degree, making skittering swarms of cockroaches run down the halls or rivulets of blood drip down the walls. And eventually it can be ripped apart entirely, turning locations in the world into MC Escher-esque nightmarescapes where stairs are upside down and hallways seem to stretch on forever as you try to walk through them. Practitioners of Pandemonium are known as Haunters, and given that their Arcanos exists pretty much exclusively to psychologically torture people in the Skinlands, the hierarchy hunts them with very little mercy. Depending on your philosophy...
Well, yes, that's also a great way to turn people into particularly tormented wraiths should they die with their unfinished business.
The original goals of this guild were actually somewhat noble.
Actually, now I think about it, I imagine there are some people who would actually desire that.
They were trying to weaken the walls between the world of the living and the world of the dead by constantly reminding the living of the existence of the dead. This came as a response to many cultures around the world growing increasingly horrified at the idea of dying, and therefore further and further culturally dissociating themselves from the concept, which made the shroud thicker. Many haunters still subscribe to this ideal, believing that a separation is not beneficial to either the living or the dead. Frequent use of Pandemonium eventually manifests as a black cloak, which the haunters carry around them everywhere they go, and it symbolizes them constantly rubbing up against the shroud. Some practitioners also eventually manifest signs of some of their favorite pandemonium effects that they like to create, like, for instance, constantly having bugs crawling all over their corpus. Lifeweb is the arcanos that allows practitioners to manipulate the fetters that bind wraiths to the skinlands, be it their own or the fetters of others. Fetters are powerful and deeply personal objects to wraiths, and they do come with certain costs and disadvantages.
Yeah, like what happens if one gets destroyed?
Lifeweb allows practitioners to mitigate some of those costs and disadvantages, emulate some of the beneficial effects of fetters, divine information about them, among many other things. This can create both unfathomable corruption and great opportunities for growth, allowing wraiths to change their fetters or allowing wraiths without fetters to travel into the Shadowlands. Practitioners of Lifeweb are known as monitors because their main purpose was for a long time to just keep an eye on the fetters that were located in the Shadowlands. Because yeah, you don't have an inherent sense of what is happening with your fetters. The hierarchy has for a long time used the power of the monitors to control other wraiths, especially younger ones that tend to have more fetters. So of course, this also means that for a long time, the monitors entrusted with keeping a watchful eye on the fetters of older, more powerful wraiths, senior members of the hierarchy, had a lot of influence over them as well. Because the Guild of Monitors has a sort of habit of practicing their arts in bad faith, very few people trust them anymore. Frequent use of Lifeweb eventually manifests as an inability to blink or close one's eyes at all. This, of course, represents the fact that monitors are always watching their fetters, no matter where they are. Outrage is
I think I might have met a few wraiths. It's who use Lifeweb then. Well, I think I'll stop here and finish up another time. Thank you for watching with me. It's honestly quite nice to be back. I've kind of missed doing this. I hope you all have a wonderful night and a happy new year. Here. Anyway, ta-ta, and until next time.